often have we not been told that money simply cannot buy happiness? Traditional wisdom suggests that money can enslave your minds, keeping you away from the real sources of happiness. However, the fact is that if managed wisely, it can actually set you free from worries around debt, your loved ones' well being, children's future, and of course, your own retirement. Ahead of India's 75th Independence Day, as part of Moneycontrol's Financial Freedom series, we will be speaking to stalwarts from across the financial services sector to understand what financial independence means for them and why all of us should strive to achieve this goal. In today's episode, we are joined by RM Vishakha, MD and CEO, IndiaFirst Life Insurance. Hello, Vishakha. Welcome to the show. What does financial independence mean for you? How would you define financial independence?
For a long time, I used to also link up financial freedom with financial independence. And then I discovered that for many people, the two are not the same. For me, being financially independent was generating my own income. Whereas that does not seem to be the case for many people who don't look at earning your own money as financial freedom. For them, it's about having enough money to be able to do what they want to do. So I just wanted to bring out that difference and how that can be viewed.
Okay. And if you could take us through your journey, how did you chart your path towards financial independence?
It is age-old wisdom that doesn't really change. Start small, save as much as you can, make savings a very disciplined habit. Put that aside before you actually spend on luxuries. That's hardcore wisdom. I don't think that changes at all. I was very, very clear on my priorities, and I said, no, I do want to have a house first. And that's very ingrained, right? That if you have a house, then at least you have somewhere to stay. And even if you don't have enough money, you will eat less, or you will, not wear the most expensive clothes, but you will have a place to stay and keep your respect. Which is to be what your age-old wisdom tells you. So I did that, and only then did I move on to luxuries. My first house I bought, I remember, was a tiny house. When we went to see it, my husband says, Kabutar Khana hai. And I said, look, Kabutar Khana afford kar sakta hai, to Kabutar Khana, but we will buy a house first, because that's like a place to stay. And then when you get more money, then we will figure out our life. So I think it's about finalizing your priorities, saving, and actually creating that basic nest egg before you get onto luxuries. I mean, eating at a five-star restaurant when you don't have enough savings, in my mind, is not very prudent. There are different ways of looking at it, Preeti, but I would advise that at any point of time, having a financial security will give you far more mental peace than spending all that you have on consumption without saving.
Actually, that's a very good point that you made. There is a tendency among some people to buy a house that they cannot afford. They want to buy a bigger house when their income does not permit it, and they end up spending several years simply paying EMIs, and also struggling to make their ends meet, and they have to compromise on their lifestyle. So that is a very good lesson, that you should look at your affordability and buy a house accordingly, in keeping with what your income permits.
When you take loans that you can have a clear visibility of repayment. I think that's as simple as that. What is your forecast of your immediate income? Take loans that give you that forecast. Don't borrow beyond your capability to repay, or beyond your conviction. It's not about satisfying the bank. It's not about giving papers that the bank will be happy with. It's about you yourself having the confidence that you will be in a position to pay that loan basis your own plans.
Is there any thumb rule that you followed? For example, that EMI should not exceed 40% of your take home, or some principle of that sort?
Yeah, absolutely. So I looked at it as the HRA. I looked at it as the rent, and I said then EMI should not be about 10% more than that. So for the initial years after I bought my first house, there was no other money left for savings. So, all the surplus beyond your expenses were going towards repaying the EMI. So that's the maximum. Right? And so I said the maximum EMI I'm willing to pay is the surplus that I have currently after meeting my base expenses. And the base expenses did not include luxuries. The base expenses meant exactly that. It meant base expenses, not designer clothes or designer handbags or any of the luxury items. And then I said, whatever I have, because then as the income grows, your disposable income will also grow. So that's how I kind of looked at what I'm willing to pay.
Right, right. That's a very important lesson that you have shared with us today. Coming to financial investments, which instruments or asset classes rather did you choose to invest in during the initial phase of your career?
My initial phase of my career is almost early 90s. So late 80s, early 90s. I started working in 1987. And the interest rates were very high at that point of time. So debt instruments were very high. Privatization had not yet happened. So you did not have the share market as active as it is today. You had to buy a mandatory LIC policy because you needed reduction. So the ATC reduction came with a mandatory LIC policy, and corporate debt. I think that's what was the primary investment.
All right, all right. So, any mistakes that you think you might have made during those years and lessons that you learned from them?
Yes, absolutely. I think not doing your own research is definitely a mistake. Okay. I remember, much as I said that the share market wasn't very active, there was somebody who said invest money in this particular company, and we invested, and then we lost. In those days, 25,000 rupees was a lot of money to lose. Think about it as 2,400 was your monthly salary, right? So losing 25,000 was a lot of money to lose. And we did lose that money. And I think after that, we as a couple, we never really invested in anything unless we did our own research. And we had some really trusted advisors who also had skin in the game.
So for youngsters today, what would be your advice? Those who have just taken up their first job, what is the asset mix that they should look at initially?
It would depend very much on the concept of suitability. Well, people think suitability is, it's just become a rhetoric. It's not a rhetoric. Suitability is dependent on your individual expenses. What are your liabilities? What are your repayments that you need to make? So if we take a profile of, say, a young working couple who don't have to look after their parents. Let's assume they have no responsibilities of having to look after their parents or siblings, and they only have to manage for them. So when you look at it as a profile of a customer, right? So let's take this profile of just a young working couple in their late 20s. And let's assume they have no responsibilities of looking after their parents or sending home money. They have to make it a practice to put aside a certain amount of their monthly income. So I like this concept that actually had been written in a book that I had read before. It's good to have two accounts. One is an income account, one is an expense account. All your salaries and any other income that you have comes into your income account. And then you sit down and say how much expenses you want to actually spend per month, and transfer that much amount into your expense account. So that automatically puts a discipline on the amount of money that you want to spend and you intend to spend, and what is left in the income account that you use for your investments. Since there is no short-term liability, the advice would be to invest into the stock market. Now you can do that through multiple means. You can do it through purchasing of unit-linked insurance policies. You can do it through purchase of SIPs. You can do it through direct purchase of stocks. But any of these options, I think, should be used. A term plan is something that you should buy right at the beginning, because, while you don't have any responsibilities to others, you have responsibilities towards each other, right? And so I think for the foreseeable income that you expect to generate, which your partner has got expectations of, you need to buy a term plan for that amount. So I think that is what my advice would be for.
And also health insurance, right? Also
Oh
health
yes, of
insurance,
course. Of
especially given
course.
what we've seen in the last 1 year.
Completely. I just assumed that health insurance is something going to be provided by corporates, but you're right. Medical claim of your own and even a top up if necessary is something that you should definitely do.
Right, right. And finally, we spoke about youngsters, but generally, what would be your advice to anybody who is looking to, whose aim is to achieve financial independence now? Somebody who could be even closer to retirement, for example. What should they do to ensure that they are on track to achieving financial independence?
Preeti, discipline. Okay. I think discipline is an underrated word in financial discipline. We talk about discipline in the food that we eat. If you're a diabetic, you're told don't eat sugar, and you will be very disciplined about it if you're a reasonable individual who wants to look after and not competition. Now, if you know you are somebody who spends whatever you have, all right, if you know you're somebody who can't manage money practically but gets emotional about money, then you really need to ensure that you put money away into instruments that you can't touch. I'll give an example since you said age is no bar. If you look at people who are just about retiring, right, and they're getting corpuses of their superannuation funds or their gratuity or PF, okay, there are people who will be able to manage that very, very, very practically. So they'll take that corpus, they'll put it aside, they will either buy, mutual funds or FDs or, RBI bonds or anything else, or even buy an annuity, a portion of it, and they'll be able to manage. Now, there are some people who need to be protected from themselves because they will probably spend that entire money giving it away as loans or giving it away to somebody else or spending on some unnecessary expenditure. Those people need to be protected and their money needs to get locked away into annuities which they can't touch. The return may be marginally lower than if they invested it themselves. But when you compare it to not having that money at all, I think a modest return is better than having no money and no return, right? So understand yourself, understand what is your relationship with money, how practical can you be with your money and your money making decisions, and then choose the instruments you want to put money into based on your own financial discipline and your own approach to money.
Thanks a lot for being on a show, Vishakha. It was great having you here. Thank you so much.
It was absolutely good talking to you. Thank you.